My name is Meadow Cooper. I am 33 years old. 3 days ago, I stood on a stage at a Virginia country club, staring down 100 of the wealthiest people in the state. The room smelled of expensive catered salmon and fresh lilies. The microphone in my hand picked up the sharp intake of my own breath. My mother, Patricia, stood a few feet away from me. She was dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She had just spent 10 minutes painting a beautiful, tragic portrait of her maternal devotion, soaking up the sympathetic applause of her peers. She told them how she stayed awake for 3 weeks, terrified she would lose her youngest daughter. She told them how family was her anchor during the darkest time of her life. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the women in designer dresses wiping tears from their eyes. I leaned into the microphone. I said, "My mother just told you I survived a tragedy. She is lying. I survived a murder attempt." I watched the blood drain from her face. I watched her perfectly manicured hands start to shake. The string quartet in the corner stopped playing. The silence in that room was heavy enough to break bones. Before I tell you what the police found in her designer handbag and how I made sure she lost everything she valued, please take a moment to subscribe. If you have ever been the scapegoat in your own family, you know exactly how cold that dynamic can be. Drop a comment with your age and let me know you are listening. Welcome to Luke Revenge Start. Now let me take you back 3 weeks earlier to the moment I woke up and realized I was entirely on my own. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor was the only sound in the room. I opened my eyes to a ceiling of pale perforated tiles. My throat felt like cracked parchment. A dull ache radiated from my kidneys up to my collarbone. I did not know the date. I did not know how long I had been tethered to the tubes snaking into my forearm. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was numb and dry. A nurse stepped into the dim light. She paused when she saw my open eyes. She offered a tight, professional smile. It was the specific kind of smile reserved for patients waking up to an empty room. "Welcome back," she murmured, checking the vitals on the screen. "You have been unconscious for 21 days. We almost lost you, Meadow." 21 days. The number hung in the sterile air. "My family," I rasped. The words scraped against my vocal cords. "Are they outside?" The nurse lowered her gaze. She adjusted a valve on my pole a little too meticulously. "I can try calling them again," she said. I have left several voicemails over the last few weeks. She did not have to say anything else. The visitor chair in the corner spoke volumes. No discarded coats, no wilted flowers, no empty coffee cups, just a pristine vinyl seat that had not been touched in 3 weeks. I pointed a trembling finger at the personal belongings bag on the side table. The nurse handed me my phone. The battery was clinging to single digits. I braced myself for a flood of panicked messages. I assumed there would be dozens of missed calls demanding updates from the doctors. I unlocked the screen. 0 missed calls from Patricia Cooper. 1 text message from my older sister Vanessa, dated the afternoon I was admitted to the intensive care unit. "Stop being dramatic and call me when you are done with this stunt." I locked the screen. The glass felt like ice against my palm. The physical pain in my abdomen was sharp, but the realization settling in my chest was heavier. Vanessa's words were a familiar refrain. They echoed a Tuesday evening 11 years ago. I was 22, buried under stacks of tax law textbooks in a cramped apartment, fighting for my certified public accountant license. My mother had stood in my doorway, a leather handbag slung over her shoulder. She was demanding I co-sign a luxury car lease for Vanessa. "She needs the optics for her new job," Patricia had insisted. Her tone left no room for debate. "You are just sitting here reading. Do not be selfish with your credit." Vanessa was the golden child. She was the one who got her tuition paid while I took out loans. She was the one who got a down payment for her house while I worked 60-hour weeks. I refused to sign that day. I paid for it with 6 months of the silent treatment. My career as a senior financial auditor was built on boundaries they hated. To them, my independence was a personal insult. My self-made wealth was an emergency fund they felt entitled to, yet could not touch. I set the phone on the tray table. The isolation in this hospital room was not an oversight. It was a punishment. They assumed my sudden organ failure was just an inconvenience to their schedules. They thought I was playing a game to get attention. The heavy wooden door to my room swung open, cutting off my thoughts. Dr. Aris Thorne walked in, holding a thick medical file. His expression lacked the usual bedside warmth. He did not look like a physician bringing a recovery plan. He looked at the charts, then at me, with a grim, calculating stillness. He did not ask how I was feeling. He simply closed the door behind him, pulled a chair to the edge of my bed, and looked me dead in the eye. "We need to talk," he said. "Not about your recovery. We need to talk about what we found in your blood." Dr. Aris Thorne did not wear the standard white coat of a general practitioner. He wore a tailored navy suit beneath a clinical badge that read toxicology. He did not treat illnesses. He investigated bodily crime scenes. Standing at the foot of my bed, he flipped a page in my chart with a crisp snap. He looked from the paper to my face. The grim set of his jaw told me my survival was a statistical anomaly. I asked him where my mother and sister were. He informed me they were on their way. They had initially declined his request for an in-person consultation, citing busy schedules. Dr. Thorne did not accept their excuses. He told them if they did not arrive within the hour, he would contact state authorities to file a formal report for medical abandonment of a vulnerable adult. The threat worked. An hour and a half later, the heavy door swung open. The sterile scent of iodine and rubbing alcohol was instantly overpowered by the heavy floral notes of my mother's signature perfume. Patricia Cooper stepped into the room wearing a pristine, cream-colored silk blouse and a fresh blowout. She did not rush to my side. She did not weep at the sight of my bruised arms or the sunken hollows of my cheeks. She stood near the doorway, treating the intensive care unit like an inconvenient waiting room. My sister Vanessa trailed right behind her. Vanessa held a large iced matcha latte in one hand and her phone in the other. Her thumb swiped across the screen before she finally looked up. Her eyes swept over my frail form. There was no pity in her gaze. There was only a cold calculation. "What is the urgency, Dr. Thorne?" my mother asked. She checked her gold wristwatch. "We had to cancel a very important charity committee meeting to be here. Meadow is awake now. Can she not just go to a rehabilitation center?" Dr. Thorne did not answer her immediately. He walked over to the wall and hit a switch, dimming the harsh fluorescent lights. He pulled a small remote from his pocket and activated a projector mounted on the ceiling. A high-resolution cross-section of a human torso appeared on the blank wall opposite my bed. The organs were rendered in stark contrast. "These are your daughter's scans," he said, addressing my mother. His voice was devoid of any bedside manner. "Look at the liver and the kidneys. The tissue is severely compromised." Initially, the emergency room physicians assumed Meadow suffered a rare genetic failure. But I specialize in environmental and chemical trauma. I look for what does not belong. He turned to me. "Meadow, I need you to think back to the month before you collapsed. Did you experience any unusual symptoms? Think small, things you might have brushed off." I closed my eyes. The memories were hazy, fragmented by the coma, but a few distinct moments surfaced. I remembered sitting in my kitchen trying to drink my morning coffee. I poured it down the sink because it tasted like copper. I remembered standing in the shower watching clumps of my dark hair circle the drain. I had blamed the grueling hours at my firm. Tax season always brought stress. I thought I was just burned out. I told Dr. Thorne about the metallic taste. I told him about the hair loss. He nodded. He clicked the remote again. A long list of chemical compounds filled the wall. "Those are the textbook early indicators of heavy metal toxicity," he said. "Specifically, thallium." The word hung in the quiet air. Thallium. It is odorless and tasteless when dissolved in food or liquid. Dr. Thorne continued, "It was once used as a rodenticide before it was banned for being too dangerous. It does not happen by accident. Someone has been steadily dosing Meadow for weeks. This was not a sudden health crisis. This was an intentional poisoning. I turned my head to look at my family. Patricia took a step backward. She did not gasp in horror. She did not rush to my side and vow to find the person who hurt me. Instead, the blood vanished from her face, leaving her skin the color of ash. Her chest heaved in shallow, jagged breaths. She turned toward the open doorway. Her foot caught the edge of the doorway transition strip. The sharp scuff of her expensive designer heel, skidding against the polished linoleum, echoed down the hall. Her knees gave out. She collapsed against the corridor wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. It was not a collapse of sorrow. I audit people who get caught hiding money. I know the physical reaction of a person who realizes their deepest secret has just been dragged into the light. My mother was terrified. Dr. Thorne ignored her theatrical fall. He looked at Vanessa. "I have already contacted the state police," he said. "They are on their way." The detectives arrived 20 minutes later, 2 men in wrinkled suits carrying small notepads. They questioned Dr. Thorne first. Then they stood by my bed. They asked me the standard questions. Who had a grudge against me? Who stood to gain from my death? "I am a senior financial auditor," I told them. My voice was a raspy whisper, but I made sure every word was clear. I dig through corporate records to find missing money. I ruin careers for a living. I gave them a name, Harrison Cole. He was a vice president at a logistics firm I audited last quarter. I found a paper trail proving he funneled corporate funds into offshore accounts to cover his gambling debts. Because of my report, he was fired. His pension was revoked. He was facing federal indictment. The day the audit went public, he sent me a threatening email promising I would regret ruining his life. The detectives exchanged a look. The older one wrote Harrison Cole down in bold letters. It was a perfect narrative for them. A disgruntled, disgraced executive seeking revenge against the auditor who took him down. Workplace retaliation was neat. It had a clear motive. Vanessa seized the opening. She stepped forward, placing a comforting hand over her chest. She modulated her voice to sound like the deeply concerned sibling. "Meadow also takes a lot of weird health products," Vanessa said. She looked right at the detectives. "She is always buying cheap, holistic supplements from those sketchy online wellness brands. Detox teas, herbal cleanses. Half of them do not even have ingredients listed on the labels. I always told her they were dangerous. Maybe one of those batches was contaminated." The younger detective nodded thoughtfully. He jotted down a note about unregulated supplements. Between a corporate enemy with a documented history of threats and a plausible theory about tainted wellness products, the detectives had all the reasonable doubt they needed. The domestic foul play angle evaporated from their minds. Dr. Thorne crossed his arms. "The dosage required to cause this level of organ failure does not come from a bad batch of green tea," he argued. "This was targeted." The older detective offered a polite but dismissive smile. "We appreciate the medical insight, Doctor. We will secure a subpoena for Mr. Cole's communications and look into the supplement manufacturers. Let us handle the criminal side of things." They handed me a business card and walked out of the room. They promised to keep me updated on the corporate investigation. The heavy door clicked shut. Patricia had managed to pull herself up from the hallway floor. She sat in the visitor chair, sipping from a small plastic cup of water. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes darted everywhere except at my face. Vanessa stood near the window, checking her phone again. The tension in her shoulders had vanished. She looked relaxed. She looked victorious. The reality of my situation settled over me like a lead blanket. The police were going to spend the next month chasing a disgraced vice president and questioning random tea companies. They had just handed my family a perfect alibi. I was lying in a hospital bed with failing kidneys and compromised lungs. The 2 women who put me here were standing 3 feet away, adjusting their jewelry and checking their emails. If I waited for the law to protect me, I was going to die. I needed to know exactly why they did this, and I needed to gather the proof myself. The detectives were looking for a corporate thief. They did not realize the real thieves were already inside the room. My family thought they had won. They thought I was weak. They had no idea I was about to turn my hospital bed into a war room. The hospital corridor outside my room remained unnervingly quiet for the next 48 hours. My mother and sister did not return. They were likely busy constructing their alibis and enjoying the breathing room the detectives had handed them. The silence was my only company until the evening of the third day. The heavy door creaked open just enough for a tall, broad-shouldered man to slip inside. Marcus was Vanessa's husband. He was a high school principal who spent his days managing teenagers and his nights managing his wife's escalating credit card bills. He always looked exhausted, but tonight the fatigue was etched deeper into the lines around his eyes. He wore a rumpled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He did not bring flowers or performative sympathy. He brought an anxious, restless energy. "Meadow," he whispered, closing the door softly. He approached the bed with hesitant steps. "Thank God you are awake. They told me it was a waiting game." I studied his face. Marcus was the collateral damage of my family. He was a decent man who married into a toxic dynasty. He had always been kind to me, even when Vanessa was actively trying to isolate me from their children. He was the only one who seemed genuinely relieved that I was still breathing. "Thank you for coming, Marcus," I said. My voice was slightly stronger now, but I kept it low. "Where is your wife?" He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. "She is at home. She said she could not handle the hospital environment. It triggers her anxiety." I almost laughed. Anxiety. That was a convenient word for guilt. Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His gaze dropped to his hands. He was twisting his gold wedding band round and round on his finger. It was a nervous habit I had noticed over the years whenever Vanessa was lying to him about something significant. He twisted the ring so hard I thought it might cut off his circulation. "I need to ask you something, Meadow," he said. His voice dropped an octave. "It is none of my business, but I need to know. Did you give Vanessa money right before you got sick?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I kept my face perfectly still. "What kind of money?" He swallowed hard. We had a balloon payment due on the house, $150,000. It was supposed to be due next year, but the lender called it in early. I was terrified. We do not have that kind of liquidity. I was looking into second mortgages, trying to figure out how to keep the house. Then, 3 days before you went into the hospital, Vanessa told me it was handled. She said she paid the balance in full. He looked up at me. His eyes were pleading for an explanation that did not destroy his reality. "She told me it was an early inheritance," he continued. "She said your mother arranged it. But your mother is always complaining about cash flow." I checked our joint accounts. The money came from a wire transfer, but the sender name was masked. Just a routing number. "Did you do that, Meadow? Did you authorize a transfer?" The room felt suddenly very cold. $150,000. That was nearly half of my liquid savings account. I had built that account over a decade of 60-hour work weeks, skipping vacations, and driving a 10-year-old sedan. "No, Marcus," I said quietly. "I did not give her a dime." He stopped twisting the ring. His hands froze. "Are you sure? Maybe you set up a loan and forgot, before the coma." "I am an auditor, Marcus. I track money for a living. I do not forget six-figure transfers. I have not authorized a wire in over a year." He slumped back in his chair. The color drained from his face. "Then where did she get it? She does not have access to your accounts." That was the terrifying plot hole. How did they bypass the bank fraud alerts? Modern financial institutions have rigorous security protocols. They require two-factor authentication. They flag unusual activity. You cannot just call a bank and move $150,000 out of someone else's account without triggering an immediate lockdown, unless you have the legal authority to do it. My mind raced backward, sifting through the weeks before my collapse. The heavy workload, the late nights, the metallic taste in my coffee. I remembered a Sunday afternoon in my kitchen. Vanessa had dropped by unannounced. She brought a stack of tax documents for my mother. She said Patricia was disorganized and needed my help sorting out some capital gains paperwork. I was exhausted. My head was pounding. I had leafed through the pages checking the numbers. I signed the preparer sections where Vanessa pointed. She had slipped it in. a power of attorney document. It is standard size, standard formatting. If it is buried in a stack of 50 pages of legal jargon and you trust the person handing you the pen, you might not read the header. You just sign on the dotted line. I had given them the keys to my entire life while drinking the very tea they were poisoning me with. Marcus was watching me. He saw the realization dawn on my face. "Meadow, what is it? What did she do?" "She stole it," I said. The words tasted like ash. "She forged or tricked me into signing a power of attorney. She waited until I was unconscious, and then she raided my accounts." Marcus shook his head violently. "No, she cannot do that. That is a felony. The bank would need a notary." "They found one," I replied. "Or they paid one. People with gambling debts or balloon payments get very creative when they are desperate." He stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the linoleum. He paced the small length of the room. His hands were shaking now. He was a high school principal. He lived a life of rules and ethics. He could not comprehend the magnitude of the crime his wife had just committed. "If this is true, Meadow," he stammered, "if she did this, the poisoning, the police think it was that corporate guy. But if she needed you out of the way to take the money..." He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. The financial motive was the missing piece of the puzzle. The heavy metal toxicity was not an act of pure malice or jealousy. It was a calculated business decision. They needed me incapacitated so they could activate the power of attorney without me receiving the fraud alerts on my phone. They needed me in a coma to drain the accounts. And they needed me dead so I could never report the theft. Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at me with a mixture of horror and profound sadness. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I am married to a monster." "You did not know Marcus. Do not carry her guilt." "I need to go home," he said. "I need to look at her computer. She keeps all her financial records in a locked folder. If she has a copy of that forged document, I will find it." "Do not confront her," I warned sharply. The pain in my ribs flared, but I ignored it. "If she knows we are onto her, she will destroy the evidence. She will move the rest of the money offshore. You have to act normal. You have to pretend you know nothing." He nodded slowly. "Can you check your accounts from here? See how bad it is?" "I need my laptop," I said. "My work laptop." "It is secure. It should be in my townhouse." "I will bring it tomorrow," he promised. "I will get it during my lunch break. Just stay safe, Meadow. Do not drink anything they bring you. Do not eat anything they send." He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. He did not look back when he spoke. "I am going to help you burn her to the ground." The door closed softly behind him. The hospital room was silent again. The fear that had gripped me since I woke up was gone. It was replaced by something entirely different. A cold, hard clarity. I lay back against the pillows. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I was alone. I was poisoned. My own family had tried to execute me for a payout. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They left me alive long enough to figure it out. And they forgot that I hunt financial criminals for a living. I was not just going to survive. I was going to turn my hospital bed into a command center. I was going to trace every stolen dollar. And I was going to use their own greed to build the trap that would end them. Marcus returned the next afternoon carrying a faded canvas messenger bag. He slipped through the heavy door like a shadow. The hospital corridor behind him was bustling with the midday shift change. But inside my room, the air was stagnant and tense. He set the bag on the edge of my mattress. He unbuckled the flap and pulled out my encrypted work laptop. "I checked her home office this morning," he whispered. "I could not find any physical documents. She keeps everything locked behind biometric passwords on her desktop. I did not want to trigger an alert by trying to guess the code." "You did the right thing," I told him. I reached for the silver device. The cool metal casing grounded me. I need to see the damage from my end. Marcus checked his watch. I have to get back to the high school. The superintendent is visiting this afternoon. Vanessa thinks I am picking up dry cleaning. She is actually talking about hosting a welcome home brunch for you when you are discharged. The hypocrisy was suffocating. She was planning a party with the funds she stole from the guest of honor. I thanked Marcus and promised to keep the laptop hidden. He offered a grim nod and slipped back out the door. I was alone again. I propped a pillow behind my back. My ribs throbbed in protest, but I pushed the pain aside. I was no longer a patient recovering from organ failure. I was a senior financial auditor investigating a multi-layered fraud case. I bypassed the unsecure public wireless network of the hospital and tethered the computer to my encrypted mobile hotspot. I logged into my primary financial dashboard. My checking account was relatively untouched. That was a smart tactical move on their part. A drained checking account causes bounced automatic payments and immediate red flags. The real money was always stored elsewhere. I clicked the tab for my brokerage portfolio. The screen refreshed. The loading wheel spun for 2 seconds. Then the balance appeared. $0.00. My breath caught in my throat. 8 years of disciplined investing. Every skipped vacation, every delayed purchase, every late night spent working overtime. It was all gone. I pulled up the transaction history. The liquidation was executed in a single sweeping trade. I checked the date. It was the exact afternoon I was admitted to the emergency room. I clicked on the authorization logs. A scanned document had been uploaded to the portal to bypass the standard security holds. It was a durable power of attorney. I opened the digital file and stared at the screen. There was my signature. It was authentic. Vanessa had slipped that single sheet of paper into the thick stack of tax documents I reviewed for them a month ago. I had signed my own financial death warrant while sitting at my kitchen island, drinking a cup of coffee laced with heavy metals. The theft did not stop at the stock market. I opened a new browser window and accessed the county property records database. I typed in the address of my Richmond townhouse. The property had always been owned free and clear. I bought it as a foreclosure and renovated it myself. It was my sanctuary. The database pulled up the deed history. A new filing had been recorded 10 days ago. It was a home equity line of credit. The loan amount was $200,000, the maximum allowable limit. They had leveraged the equity in my home to extract a staggering pile of cash. I downloaded the loan origination paperwork. My eyes scanned the borrower details. The primary applicant was listed as Meadow Cooper via power of attorney. I scrolled down to the guarantor section. The bank required a secondary signature for a loan of that size, especially since the primary account holder was incapacitated. There was a name printed on the bottom line, Patricia Cooper. My stomach plummeted. I had spent the last 3 days telling myself that my mother was merely an enabler. I wanted to believe Vanessa acted alone. I wanted to believe Patricia was just too cowardly to stop her favorite child from committing a crime. But the black and white text on the loan document shattered that illusion. Patricia was a legally bound co-signer. She was an active participant in the plunder of my estate. They orchestrated this together. A vivid memory from earlier that morning flashed in my mind. Patricia had stopped by for a brief performative visit. She stood near the window complaining about the hospital cafeteria coffee. As she lifted the paper cup to her mouth, her sleeve slipped down her wrist. I had noticed a stack of heavy gold cuffs clicking against each other. Cartier love bracelets. They were brand new. The polished gold had caught the fluorescent light perfectly. She had been wearing my stolen life savings on her arm. She stood in my recovery room wearing the jewelry bought with the equity of my home while I was breathing through an oxygen tube. The sheer scale of the betrayal was dizzying. Between the liquidated stocks and the property loan my family had extracted over $300,000 in less than 3 weeks. I opened my email client. I needed to see where the funds were routed. I searched my archived folders looking for automated bank notifications. Vanessa had been thorough. She deleted the alerts from my primary inbox, but she did not know about the hidden forwarding rules I established years ago for tax compliance tracking. I found the hidden folder. It contained a chronological record of every digital move they made. One specific email caught my attention. The subject line read, Wire transfer successful. It detailed the movement of the stock portfolio funds into an offshore holding account. I looked at the timestamp on the email, 4:14 in the afternoon. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my thick medical chart. I flipped to the intensive care unit logs from my first day. I scanned the entries until I found the matching date and time. At 4:12 that afternoon, my kidneys had shut down. My heart had stopped. The medical team called a code blue. They spent 6 minutes using a defibrillator to shock my heart back into a rhythm. The clinical detached email alert pinged in my inbox, confirming the wire transfer at the exact hour doctors were fighting to restart my pulse. The thallium poisoning was not born out of sibling rivalry or petty jealousy. It was a desperate, cold-blooded financial strategy. They needed a catastrophic medical event. They needed me, on a ventilator, unable to receive phone calls from fraud departments. They needed a distraction so large that no one would notice the money disappearing. They probably hoped I would die on that table, ensuring the secret would be buried with me. I closed the laptop. The fan whirred softly, cooling the processor. I could call the police right now. I could hand the detectives the digital paper trail. But the Virginia authorities were already laser-focused on Harrison Cole. My family had handed them a perfect corporate scapegoat. If I accused my mother and sister today, they would play the victim. They would tell the police I was suffering from neurological damage caused by the coma. They would claim I was hallucinating. The authorities might freeze the accounts, but Vanessa and Patricia would have enough time to shred the evidence and spin a narrative of a tragic family misunderstanding. I could not strike yet. I needed them to confess. I needed to catch them on tape admitting to the poisoning and the theft. To do that, I had to give them exactly what they wanted. I had to become the broken, helpless victim they designed me to be. If they thought the heavy metals had damaged my brain, they would drop their guard. They would assume I was too impaired to understand the missing money. They would get sloppy. I pushed the laptop under my mattress, hiding it from view. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The game had fundamentally changed. I was no longer fighting for my health. I was preparing for a war. And the first step was to play dead. Dr. Aris Thorne stared at the printed form in his hands. His jaw was tight. He placed the clipboard on the edge of my bed and tapped the top of the page. He told me signing a discharge against medical advice was a reckless decision. He reminded me my kidneys were still recovering from thallium exposure. He said I required round-the-clock monitoring and immediate intervention if my vitals dropped. I picked up the pen. My fingers were stiff, but my mind was sharp. I told him I appreciated everything he had done to save my life. Staying in this hospital room, however, made me a sitting duck. The local detectives were wasting their time chasing a disgruntled corporate executive. They were looking for a phantom, while the real culprits were walking through the front doors of this facility during visiting hours. If I stayed in this bed waiting for the legal system to catch up, I would remain a victim. I did not want to be a victim. I wanted to be the architect of their ruin. Dr. Thorne watched me sign the paperwork. He did not agree with my choice, but he recognized the cold determination in my eyes. He warned me that heavy metal toxicity could have sudden, lingering effects. He handed me a prescription for binding agents and instructed me to call him the second I felt dizzy. I thanked him and slid the paperwork back across the tray table. The legal tether to the hospital was severed. Once the doctor left the room, I reached under my mattress. Marcus had returned briefly that morning before his first period class. He brought my encrypted laptop and a cheap prepaid cellular device I requested. A burner phone, untraceable and purchased with cash. I turned the small plastic rectangle over in my palm. The buttons were rigid. The screen was pixelated. It was perfect. I typed a number from memory. During my early career as an auditor, I uncovered a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as a charitable foundation. The case required federal intervention. That was how I met Special Agent David Russo. He was a veteran investigator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation who appreciated my meticulous spreadsheets. We built a mutual respect over the years. He knew I did not waste time with frivolous accusations. I sent a brief encrypted text message to his direct line. I told him I had a high-priority financial fraud case involving identity theft and attempted homicide. I gave him the loan origination numbers and the wire transfer routing codes. I told him to look into Patricia and Vanessa Cooper. He replied 2 minutes later with a single word confirming receipt. The federal gears were now quietly turning in the background. Next, I dialed a local number. Evelyn Pierce was a ruthless civil litigator in Richmond. She was a woman who dismantled hidden assets and froze bank accounts before the opposing counsel even finished their morning coffee. I hired her to file an immediate injunction on the property deed. I instructed her to prepare the paperwork, but to hold the filing until I gave the specific command. The trap required precise timing. If Evelyn moved too soon, my mother and sister would panic and flee. I needed them comfortable. I needed them to feel victorious. I hid the phone back under the mattress. I adjusted the hospital blanket, pulling it up to my chin. I softened the muscles in my face. I let my jaw hang slightly slack. I practiced blinking slower than usual. The heavy metal exposure provided the perfect medical excuse for severe cognitive impairment. I was going to give them the exact version of Meadow they desired, a broken, helpless burden. The door clicked open at 2 in the afternoon. Patricia walked in first, followed closely by Vanessa. Today, my mother wore a tailored navy blazer and the stolen Cartier bracelets. Vanessa carried a boutique shopping bag containing overpriced organic lotions. They approached the bed with practiced expressions of deep sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia crooned. She reached out and patted my shoulder. Her touch felt like ice. "You look so tired. The doctor said you were discharging yourself today. We were so worried when we heard." I turned my head toward her. I made the movements sluggish and uncoordinated. I let my eyes drift past her face, focusing on the blank wall behind her. I forced my voice to sound thick and slurred. "Mom," I whispered, "my head hurts. Everything is fuzzy." Vanessa stepped closer. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for any sign of deception. I maintained the vacant stare. I let my right hand tremble against the sheets. "The toxicity was severe," Vanessa said. Her tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear the underlying tension. "Do you remember what happened in Meadow? Do you remember getting sick?" I blinked slowly. I shook my head, causing a strand of hair to fall across my cheek. "No," I mumbled. "I just remember feeling tired. I cannot remember much of anything lately. It is hard to think." Patricia exhaled a breath she had been holding. The relief washing over her was palpable. She shared a quick, triumphant glance with my sister. They believed the thallium had eroded my neurological pathways. They thought their secret was safe behind a wall of brain damage. I needed to push the deception further. I needed them to feel a profound sense of superiority. On my tray table sat a plastic cup of water and a wrapped plastic spoon left over from breakfast. I reached for the cup with trembling fingers. I deliberately knocked the spoon off the edge of the tray. It clattered against the linoleum floor. I let out a soft, frustrated sob. I stared down at the floor, acting as though picking up a simple piece of plastic was an insurmountable task. "I cannot do it," I cried out, my voice trembling with fake helplessness. "My hands will not work right. Please." Vanessa leaned over and picked up the spoon. She did not hand it back to me. She placed it on the far corner of the table, out of my reach. I looked up at her. Her eyes were gleaming with a dark, arrogant satisfaction. The golden child was finally looking down at her overachieving sibling. She was soaking in the sight of my vulnerability. She had taken my money, and now she believed she had taken my mind. "You just need rest, Meadow," Vanessa said. Her voice dripped with condescending pity. "You cannot go back to your townhouse like this. You cannot even hold a cup of water." Patricia nodded in agreement. The bracelets jingled on her wrist. "Vanessa is right. We cannot let you live alone while you are in this state. You are coming to stay at Vanessa's house. We have the guest room all set up. We are going to take care of you." The invitation was framed as an act of familial devotion. In reality, it was a containment strategy. They wanted me under their roof to monitor my communications and ensure I did not stumble upon their financial crimes. They wanted to control my environment until they could secure the rest of my assets. I lowered my gaze, acting defeated. "Okay," I slurred. "Thank you." I had committed to playing this role for exactly 48 hours. I was willingly walking into the exact location where the poison had been mixed into my food. It was a perilous tactical maneuver. I knew the only way to obtain a verbal confession was to infiltrate their space. I shifted from being a victim lying in a hospital bed to the hidden orchestrator of their impending downfall. They thought they were bringing a helpless patient into their home. They did not know they were inviting a predator into their living room. The nurse entered to finalize the discharge paperwork. Patricia signed the release forms, acting the part of the dutiful mother. Vanessa gathered my few belongings. I sat in the wheelchair, staring blankly ahead. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The next phase of the operation was about to begin inside the very walls where my sister had plotted my demise. The drive to my sister's house was a quiet exercise in psychological endurance. Marcus drove the luxury sport utility vehicle, while Patricia and Vanessa sat in the front discussing dinner plans. They talked about roasted chicken and organic vegetables, with the breezy, casual tone of people who had not just stolen 6 figures from the woman sitting in the back seat. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. I kept my eyes half closed, maintaining the facade of a brain-damaged invalid. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through my bruised ribs, but I did not make a sound. We arrived at the sprawling suburban property just as the sun began to set. Marcus carried my small hospital bag inside. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at my mother. He simply set the bag down in the hallway and retreated to his home office under the guise of answering school emails. He was a man suffocating in his own home. Vanessa guided me to the guest bedroom on the first floor. The space was decorated in oppressive shades of pastel pink and mint green. Floral wallpaper covered every vertical surface. A large antique mirror hung above a pristine white dresser. It looked like a room from a glossy magazine catalog, but to me, it felt like a holding cell. The air was thick with the scent of synthetic vanilla room spray. "You need to rest, Meadow," my sister said. She pulled the thick duvet back. She fluffed the pillows with exaggerated care. Her performance as the devoted caretaker was flawless. She handed me a glass of water and 2 small white pills. "The doctor said these will help you sleep through the night." I recognized the pills. They were standard, over-the-counter sleep aids, but I had no intention of ingesting anything she handed me. I took the pills with a trembling hand. I placed them in my mouth and took a sip of water. I tucked the tablets deep into the space between my cheek and my lower gum. I swallowed the water loudly. Vanessa smiled. She smoothed the blanket over my chest. She turned off the bedside lamp and closed the door until it clicked shut. I waited 5 minutes in the dark. When I was certain the hallway was empty, I sat up. I spat the dissolving pills into a tissue and hid it inside my empty hospital bag. I poured the remaining water into a potted fern sitting near the window. I lay back down on the mattress. I kept my eyes open, adjusting to the shadows cast by the moonlight filtering through the blinds. I needed to stay awake. I knew they were not finished extracting my wealth. They had successfully drained my stock portfolio and leveraged the equity in my townhouse. But I had one remaining financial fortress. 7 years ago, I established a secure, high-yield investment account managed by an offshore firm. It contained the bulk of my long-term retirement funds. The security protocols on that specific account were incredibly stringent. A password and a routing number were not enough to authorize a transfer. Moving any capital out of that offshore holding required biometric verification. It required a physical thumbprint linked to the primary account holder. I knew they would discover that account eventually. My tax documents contained the annual reporting forms for the offshore dividends. Vanessa had scoured those papers. She knew the money existed. She just did not have the physical key to unlock it, while I was in the hospital, surrounded by nurses. Now I was in her guest room. I was isolated. I was supposed to be deeply sedated. The digital clock on the nightstand shifted from 1:59 to 2 in the morning. The house was dead quiet. Even the distant hum of the central air conditioning had stopped. A soft, metallic click echoed from the door. The handle turned at an agonizingly slow pace. The hinges whined a fraction of an inch. I closed my eyes. I relaxed every muscle in my face. I slowed my breathing until my chest barely rose and fell. I let my jaw drop slightly open, mimicking the deep, uncontrolled slumber of a heavily medicated patient. Footsteps crept across the hardwood floor. They were light and deliberate. The intruder was trying to mask the sound of their approach by stepping only on the edges of the floorboards. Then the smell hit me. It was not the synthetic vanilla room spray. It was an overpowering, suffocating wave of heavy floral notes and rich amber. Chanel. It was the signature perfume my mother wore every single day. She wore it to my elementary school plays. She wore it to high society charity dinners. She wore it when she stood in my apartment 11 years ago, demanding I ruin my credit for Vanessa. And now she was wearing it while she crept into my dark room in the middle of the night. Patricia stopped right beside my bed. I could hear the faint fabric rustle of her silk pajamas. I could hear her shallow breathing. She stood there for a long time, simply watching me. The psychological weight of her presence was terrifying. This was the woman who gave birth to me. This was the woman who was supposed to protect me from the dangers of the world. Instead, she had become the danger. The mattress dipped slightly as she leaned over. A cold, hard object hovered near my hip. It was a smartphone or a tablet. Patricia reached out, her fingers wrapped around my right wrist. Her skin was freezing. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs. The biological instinct to pull my hand away, to scream, to fight back was overwhelming. I had to suppress every natural reflex in my body. If I flinched, the charade was over. If I opened my eyes, she would know I was lucid. I forced my arm to remain entirely limp. I allowed her to lift my hand from the mattress as if it were a dead weight. She handled my physical body with clinical detachment. There was no hesitation. There was no trembling guilt. She isolated my right thumb. I felt the cold, smooth glass of a digital scanner press against the pad of my thumb. A faint green light illuminated the darkness behind my closed eyelids. The device emitted a tiny microscopic vibration, confirming the biometric scan was successful. Patricia held my thumb against the glass for another 3 seconds, ensuring the authorization went through. Then she lowered my arm. She did not place my hand gently back onto the bed. She simply let it drop. My wrist hit the mattress with a soft thud. The green light vanished. The rustle of silk returned. Patricia turned and walked back toward the door. She did not look back. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the dark once more. I opened my eyes. I stared at the ceiling. A single tear rolled down my temple and vanished into my hairline. I did not cry because I was afraid. I cried because the final illusion of my family was dead. I had spent my entire life making excuses for my mother. I told myself she was just weak. I told myself she favored Vanessa because my sister was demanding and difficult to manage. I rationalized Patricia's cruelty as passive enabling. But the woman who just pressed my thumb to that glass was not a passive bystander. She was an active, greedy predator. She had crossed a boundary that went beyond financial theft. She had violated my physical person. She had treated my living, breathing body like a fleshy keycard to a vault. The scent of her perfume lingered in the stagnant air. It turned my stomach. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the prepaid burner phone Marcus had provided. The screen glowed with a harsh, bright light. I checked the time. It was 2:15 in the morning. Patricia now had access to the offshore account. She would try to move the funds as soon as the banks opened. The timeline of my trap had just accelerated drastically. I could no longer afford to wait days for them to slip up. The financial hemorrhage was reaching critical mass. I typed a quick message to Evelyn Pierce, my civil litigator. I told her the offshore accounts were compromised. I instructed her to prepare the asset freeze injunctions for immediate filing the moment I gave the final signal. I turned the phone off and slid it back under the pillow. I lay in the dark listening to the silence of the house. Vanessa had poisoned my food. Patricia had stolen my identity while I slept. They thought they were the apex predators in this suburban jungle. They thought they had outsmarted the system. But they were sitting on a mountain of digital evidence, and they were sharing a roof with a man who could no longer stomach their crimes. Marcus had access to the interior security cameras of this house. He knew where the digital skeletons were buried. When the sun came up, I needed to find a way to speak with him alone. The fragile alliance holding their toxic household together was about to shatter, and I was going to use the jagged pieces to cut them down. Morning arrived with the cheerful chirp of suburban birds outside the window. Sunlight filtered through the floral blinds of my pastel prison, casting long, striped shadows across the hardwood floor. The heavy scent of roasted coffee beans and expensive sweet cream drifted down the hallway. The guest room door swung open. Vanessa stepped inside carrying a silver tray. A porcelain cup of dark roast coffee and a plate of dry wheat toast rested on the gleaming metal. She wore pristine white athletic clothing, looking as though she had just finished a refreshing morning run. Her performance as the saintly, devoted caretaker was Oscar-worthy. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she chirped. Her voice was bright and sugary. "I brought you some breakfast. You need to keep your strength up." I let my eyes droop. I slurred a quiet thank you, reaching for the toast with a deliberately trembling hand. Patricia walked into the room a moment later. She clutched a leather designer purse to her chest. She complained about the rising humidity outside while adjusting her diamond earrings in the antique mirror above the dresser. "We are going out for a few hours, Meadow," my mother announced. "We need to visit that high-end boutique downtown. We are picking up our outfits for your welcome home brunch this weekend. It is going to be a gorgeous event. Everyone from the country club is thrilled to celebrate your miraculous recovery." They were using my stolen savings to buy luxury dresses for a party celebrating my survival of their own murder attempt. The twisted irony was enough to make my stomach turn, but I kept my facial expressions dull and vacant. I chewed the dry toast slowly, nodding like an obedient child. "Get some rest," Vanessa instructed. She patted my foot through the thick duvet. They turned and walked out. The front door shut with a solid thud. The deadbolt engaged. The house. Marcus stepped over the threshold. The high school principal looked as though he had aged 10 years overnight. His posture was slumped, his broad shoulders hunched forward as if he were carrying heavy stones on his back. Dark, bruised circles framed his bloodshot eyes. He had not slept a single minute. Marcus and Vanessa met 12 years ago at a local community fundraiser. He was a passionate history teacher who believed in public service. She was an aspiring event planner, drawn to his steady paycheck and reliable nature. He tolerated her vanity because he wanted a stable home for their 2 young children. He loved her, or at least he loved the woman she pretended to be in public. He pulled a wooden chair close to my bed and sat down heavily. He rested his elbows on his knees and buried his face in his hands. "I confronted her," he whispered. His voice was a hollow rasp scraping against the quiet room. "After you went to sleep last night, I waited in the kitchen. I asked her about the balloon mortgage payment again. I told her the bank routing numbers she showed me did not make sense." I sat up straight. The charade was unnecessary with him. "What did she say, Marcus?" He looked up. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. She did not even flinch. "Meadow," she looked me dead in the eye and said, "you approved a personal loan before your collapse. She claimed you wanted to help us clear the mortgage because you felt generous and wanted to support your niece and nephew." My jaw tightened. They were using his love for his children to justify robbing me blind. I knew she was lying. Marcus continued shaking his head slowly. "You are a senior financial auditor. You do not hand out 6-figure loans without a notarized contract and a structured repayment schedule. You do not move money in secret." But it was not just the lie that broke me. It was her face. She looked so proud of herself. She looked triumphant. He took a deep breath, steadying his trembling jaw. That look terrified me. It made me realize I did not know the woman sleeping in my bed. So I went into my home office and logged into our network router. Marcus explained that his school district recently upgraded their entire cybersecurity protocol to protect student records. He spent the summer sitting through intensive information technology seminars. He learned a vast amount about digital retention and network tracking. He knew Vanessa controlled the interior smart cameras in their house. She originally installed them as nanny cams when the children were toddlers. I checked the data logs, Marcus said. I noticed significant file deletions from the localized smart home storage drive. The purges happened 3 weeks ago, right before you went into the emergency room. Vanessa thought she was being clever. She thought dragging video files to a digital trash bin erased them from existence. She did not realize the primary camera account automatically synced a mirrored backup to a secondary, secure cloud server. I accessed the hidden archive while she slept, Marcus told me. A single tear finally escaped his eye, tracing a shining path down his cheek. I watched the videos, Meadow. I saw what she did. He reached into the pocket of his rumpled dress slacks. He pulled out a small rectangular object. He held it out, suspended in the space between us. I extended my right hand. The heavy, metallic clink of the silver flash drive echoed softly as Marcus dropped it into my bruised palm. The cold metal felt like a weapon. I watched the mother of my children poison her own sister, he whispered. His voice broke entirely. I watched her crush the tablets and stir them into your food containers. She was humming Meadow. She was humming a song while she mixed the toxic powder. The image sent a chill down my spine. The sheer sociopathic detachment required to hum a tune while orchestrating a murder was unfathomable. I am done, Marcus stated. The profound sadness in his eyes hardened into a fierce, sharp resolve. I am choosing my son and daughter. I cannot raise them in a house built on fraud and attempted homicide. I will not let them become like her. He leaned closer. His gaze was steady and unblinking. I will testify, he promised. I will stand before a judge in open court, and I will hand over the digital keys to my wife's prison cell. I will verify the footage. Tell me what you need me to do next. The antagonist inner circle had officially fractured. My sister thought she was a master manipulator, but she underestimated the moral compass of the man she married. She was hemorrhaging allies, and she did not even know it yet. Take the kids and go to your parents' house, I instructed him. Tell Vanessa you are taking them on a spontaneous weekend camping trip to give her quiet time to prepare for the brunch. You need to be entirely out of the blast radius when this detonates. Do not answer her calls once you leave. He nodded, standing up from the wooden chair. He looked at the silver drive resting in my hand one last time. Be careful, Meadow, he warned. She has nothing left to lose. Marcus walked out of the guest room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I listened to his heavy footsteps climbing the stairs to pack a suitcase. I was alone with the evidence. I gripped the flash drive tightly. The silver metal warmed against my skin. I possessed the undeniable digital proof of a felony. Marcus providing the security footage saved me weeks of dangerous investigation. I did not need to wait for a subpoena or rely on lazy detectives chasing corporate ghosts. Now I just needed to plug the drive into my encrypted laptop and watch the nightmare unfold with my own eyes. I had to verify the timeline of the videos. I had to match the timestamps of the poisoning to the exact moments she slipped the fraudulent power of attorney onto my kitchen island. The visual confirmation was the final piece of ammunition required for my trap. Once I viewed that footage, I would transition from gathering evidence to executing the most devastating psychological ambush my family had ever faced. I listened to the heavy oak front door slam shut. The deadbolt clicked into place, echoing down the hallway. Marcus was gone, taking his children far away from the blast radius. The sprawling suburban house fell into an eerie stillness. I sat up in the pastel guest bed. My bruised ribs ached with the effort, but the physical discomfort faded against the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I reached under the mattress and pulled out my secure work computer. I rested the device on my lap. I inserted the metallic drive Marcus had given me into the side port. The screen flickered to life, requesting my decryption passphrase. I typed the sequence and opened the recovered folder containing the hidden network archives. Several digital video files populated the directory. I sorted them by date, creating a chronological timeline of my sister's activities. I located the recording time-stamped 3 days prior to my emergency room admission. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Pressing play meant crossing a psychological threshold from which I could never return. Seeing the betrayal with my own eyes would erase any lingering trace of sisterly affection. I clicked the icon. The high-definition feed displayed my sister's gourmet kitchen. Gleaming white marble countertops and premium stainless steel appliances reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through the large bay windows. Vanessa stood near the center island. She wore expensive yoga pants and a fitted athletic top. My sister always cultivated the image of a wealthy wellness guru. She spent thousands of dollars on organic cleanses and exclusive boutique fitness memberships to project an aura of effortless superiority. She used her health routines as a weapon to make everyone else feel inadequate. On the counter sat 5 glass meal prep containers. I recognized them immediately. During tax season, I worked 80-hour weeks and barely had time to cook a decent dinner. Vanessa had offered to make my lunches, claiming it was a loving, sisterly gesture to help me through the stressful quarter. It was the perfect Trojan horse. She had presented the food as an act of selfless devotion while masking a lethal agenda. Vanessa reached into the upper pantry cabinet. She retrieved a heavy, opaque cylinder. It was her favorite brand of premium holistic detox tea. She constantly bragged about this exclusive blend imported from overseas. She claimed it purified the body and boosted cellular regeneration. The thick metal canister was intentionally designed to block out light and moisture, making it the ideal hiding spot for something far more sinister than dried herbal leaves. She unscrewed the lid. She did not pull out a fragrant tea bag. Instead, she reached deep inside the tin and retrieved a small, clear plastic bag filled with a fine, grayish powder. Thallium, the heavy metal poison that had nearly destroyed my liver and kidneys. I watched my own flesh and blood measure a precise teaspoon of the toxic substance. She sprinkled the gray dust over the grilled chicken and quinoa in the first glass bowl. She stirred the contents methodically, ensuring the poison vanished entirely into the sauce, leaving no trace of grit or discoloration. She repeated the process for the second container, then the third. She was humming. The sensitive kitchen microphone captured a faint, upbeat melody while she seasoned my food with a lethal chemical. She moved with the casual grace of someone preparing a routine family dinner. My eyes drifted to the bottom right corner of the video player. The digital timestamp blinked in bright red digits. 4:12 in the afternoon. A cold wave washed over my skin. I reached for my phone and scrolled back through my message history with my sister. I found the text exchange from that exact date. At 4:11, I had sent her a message thanking her for helping me with the meals and asking if she wanted to grab a quick coffee later that week. At 4:13, her reply arrived on my screen. She had typed, "I would love that, Meadow. Let us catch up soon," with a bright, smiling emoji. I looked back at the computer screen. She was typing that cheerful, affectionate reply with her left hand, while her right hand was literally stirring poison into my lunch. The sociopathic duality of that moment made my breath hitch. She was wishing me well while actively preparing my corpse. I paused the playback. I had seen enough. The visual proof was undeniable. This single video file locked in the attempted murder charge beyond a reasonable doubt. There was no disgruntled corporate executive to blame anymore. There were no tainted wellness supplements acting as a scapegoat. The footage was a direct, unarguable ticket to a federal penitentiary. I opened my encrypted email portal. I attached the video file to a new message. I drafted a correspondence to Evelyn Pierce, my civil litigator, and Special Agent David Russo of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I instructed Evelyn to finalize the asset freeze paperwork and prepare the civil suits for the stolen property equity. I told Agent Russo the visual confirmation of the homicide attempt was secured and ready for his review. I typed a specific directive regarding the execution of the arrest warrants. I did not want local police knocking on Vanessa's door on a random Tuesday morning. A quiet arrest would allow my mother and sister to spin a narrative of a tragic misunderstanding to their social circle. I wanted maximum visibility. I wanted their reputations dismantled in the exact environment they valued most. Patricia and Vanessa were hosting a lavish welcome home brunch for me this coming weekend. They rented the main dining room of their exclusive Virginia Country Club. They invited over 100 prominent guests to celebrate their false heroism. They intended to use my fragile recovering state as a prop to elevate their own social standing. It was a vanity project funded entirely by my stolen life savings. I told the federal agent to coordinate the strike for that specific event. I wanted my family surrounded by the elite peers they worshipped when the truth came out. I wanted their country club friends to watch the handcuffs snap shut. I hit send. The progress bar filled the screen and vanished into the digital ether. The evidence was out of my hands and in the possession of the federal government. The countdown to their destruction had officially begun. I ejected the silver drive and hid it deep inside my hospital bag under a stack of folded clothes. I closed the computer and slid it back under the mattress. I smoothed the pastel duvet, pulling it up to my chest. I now held the power to destroy Vanessa's freedom entirely. She thought she was the apex predator, holding me captive in her beautifully decorated guest room. She had no idea she was housing her own executioner. Every time she smiled at me, she was digging her own grave a little deeper. But my mission was not over. The video proved the physical act of poisoning, but it did not capture the financial confession. It did not prove my mother's direct complicity in the forged power of attorney. To secure the financial fraud convictions against both of them, I needed them to admit their crimes out loud. I had to survive the next 2 nights under this roof. I had to endure their fake smiles and intercept their poisoned tea offerings while wearing a hidden recording device. The physical danger was escalating. A single misstep or a moment of dropped character would expose my trap before the gala even began, forcing me into a direct physical confrontation with a woman who had already tried to end my life once. The sound of the front door opening downstairs broke the afternoon silence. Laughter echoed up the wooden staircase. Patricia and Vanessa had returned from their shopping excursion. I reached into the hidden compartment of my hospital discharge bag. Before leaving the medical center, I had asked my civil litigator, Evelyn, to arrange a discreet delivery. The package had arrived early that morning, disguised as a pharmacy drop-off for prescription pain medication. Inside the small brown paper sack was a micro-audio recorder. The device was no larger than a standard thumb drive. It featured a high-sensitivity microphone engineered to capture whispers across a crowded room. I peeled the backing off a strip of clear medical adhesive. I pressed the cold metal of the recorder flat against my sternum, just below my collarbone. The tape pulled tightly against my bruised skin, but the physical discomfort was a necessary anchor. I buttoned my high-necked pajama top, concealing the hardware entirely. I was no longer just a surviving victim recovering in a guest bed. I was a walking federal wiretap. I lay back against the soft pillows and waited for the performance to begin. The guest room felt smaller than it had that morning. The mint green walls and pastel pink floral wallpaper projected an image of serene domesticity. It was a suffocating illusion. My sister had decorated this space to look like a peaceful sanctuary. In reality, it was an execution chamber. Every ruffled pillow and scented candle masked the cold, hard fact that I was supposed to take my final breaths within these 4 walls. The juxtaposition of suburban perfection and premeditated murder made the air feel thick and heavy in my lungs. Heavy footsteps approached the doorway. The polished brass handle turned slowly. Vanessa glided into the room. She had changed out of her athletic wear and now wore a flowing silk lounge set. In her hands, she carried a steaming ceramic mug. The earthy scent of dried herbs and dark fruit filled the stagnant air. It was the signature aroma of the exclusive holistic blend. She had opened the opaque tin again. "I made this specially for you, Meadow," she murmured. Her voice was a soothing, melodic purr. "The doctor said your kidneys need help flushing out the remaining toxins. This tea is packed with antioxidants. It will help you sleep through the night and heal your body." The sociopathic irony of her words sent a chill down my spine. She was weaponizing the language of health and wellness to deliver a lethal chemical. I forced my hands to tremble as I reached for the mug. The ceramic surface was scalding hot against my palms. I cradled the cup, pulling it close to my chest, right above the hidden microphone. I needed the recording to capture every nuance of this interaction. Vanessa always craved an audience for her good deeds. When we were children, she would only help with household chores if our father was sitting in the living room watching her. The moment he walked outside, she would drop the broom and leave the dirt on the floor. Now she was playing the devoted nurse for an audience of one. She wanted to watch me consume the poison. She wanted the visual satisfaction of her victory. I stared down at the dark amber liquid. Steam curled from the surface, dampening my face. Thallium is odorless and tasteless. If I took even a single swallow, the heavy metal would hit my weakened organs like a sledgehammer. My liver was already compromised. A fresh dose would trigger immediate renal failure. I would not wake up the next morning. The psychological warfare was excruciating. I had to maintain the illusion of a compliant, brain-damaged patient while holding a cup of boiling death inches from my mouth. I brought the rim of the mug to my lower lip. I allowed a fraction of a drop to touch my skin, immediately wiping it away with the back of my hand. I opened my mouth and forced a dry, ragged cough. The spasm shook my entire frame. I coughed harder, making the muscles in my neck bulge. My breathing became a shallow wheeze. Vanessa took a half step backward. Her pristine silk lounge set was suddenly in the splash zone. I gasped for air. "Vanessa, I wheezed. My chest is tight. Can you get me my inhaler? I think it is in the pocket of my coat downstairs in the hallway closet." Annoyance flashed across her perfectly contoured face. She hated being treated like an errand girl, but she needed me to calm down and drink the tea. She let out a soft, frustrated sigh. "Hold the cup steady, Meadow. I will be right back. Do not spill it on the duvet." She turned on her heel and marched out the door. Her footsteps faded down the hallway and descended the staircase. I had roughly 40 seconds before she returned. I shoved the thick blanket aside. I grabbed the empty plastic medical specimen bag I had smuggled out of the hospital. I unscrewed the tight plastic cap. I tilted the ceramic mug. The dark, hot liquid cascaded into the clear bag. The heavy-duty plastic warped slightly under the intense heat, but the seams held firm. I poured every last drop, leaving only a wet residue at the bottom of the cup. I sealed the cap tightly. I shoved the scalding bag deep beneath my thigh, hiding it under the folds of the thick mattress pad. I brought the empty mug back to my chest just as her footsteps returned to the landing. Vanessa rushed into the room, holding a plastic inhaler. She paused, seeing the empty cup resting in my hands. I wiped my mouth with the back of my sleeve. I let out a long, exaggerated sigh of relief. I was so thirsty I slurred, allowing my eyes to droop heavily. The warm liquid helped my throat. "Thank you, Vanessa." She took the empty ceramic mug from my grasp. A brilliant, triumphant smile illuminated her face. She looked down at me with the supreme confidence of a predator watching its prey surrender. She believed the thallium was currently absorbing into my bloodstream. She thought the deed was finally done. The financial inheritance was secured, and the only witness to her fraud was about to slip into a permanent, irreversible slumber. Vanessa did not walk out of the room. She set the empty mug on the nightstand. She pulled up the wooden chair and sat down right beside my bed. The poison was supposed to take effect quickly, inducing a deep lethargy. She wanted to stay and watch the lights go out. She felt invincible, unburdened by any threat of consequences. It was the perfect psychological state for a criminal. People who believe they have won are no longer careful with their words. I closed my eyes, leaning into the pillow. The tape was rolling. It was time to let her talk. The wooden chair creaked as Vanessa shifted her weight. I kept my eyes half closed, allowing only a narrow slit of vision. The room was bathed in the pale glow of a street lamp filtering through the floral blinds. Vanessa held a crystal goblet. The unmistakable scent of chilled white wine drifted across the few feet separating us. She took a slow, deliberate sip. The smug clinking of ice against the expensive crystal resonated in the quiet bedroom. The sound was sharp and rhythmic. She swirled the pale liquid, watching me with a predatory stillness. "Are you awake, Meadow?" she asked. Her voice was no longer the sugary melody she used downstairs. It was flat and hollow. I let my head loll to the side. I allowed a thin line of saliva to pool at the corner of my mouth. I groaned, a low, unintelligible sound, flexing my fingers weakly against the duvet. "You look terrible," Vanessa noted. She took another sip. The ice chimed again, a cheerful sound contrasting the grim reality of a deathbed vigil. She crossed her legs, leaning closer to the mattress. "You always work too hard. 60-hour weeks, skipping family dinners to review audit files. You built that big, beautiful savings account. And for what? You do not even have a husband to spend it with. You do not have children. You just hoard it like a dragon in that boring Richmond townhouse." She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "It is truly unfair. I did everything right. I married a principal. I had the perfect children. I maintained the perfect social image. Yet I was drowning. My credit cards were maxed out. Marcus was talking about downsizing the house. Downsizing. Can you imagine the humiliation?" I moaned softly, fluttering my eyelids. I forced my breathing to sound shallow and labored. The micro-recorder taped to my sternum captured every syllable she uttered. "But you made it so easy," she continued. Her tone shifted into a boastful cadence. She wanted credit for her perceived genius. "You always thought you were the smart sister, the financial wizard. But you did not even read the paperwork I handed you last month. You just signed the signature line. A durable power of attorney, right there on your kitchen island. You handed me the keys to your entire life, and you did not even blink." She paused to finish her wine. The ice clinked one final time as she set the empty crystal goblet on the wooden nightstand. "We took the money, Meadow. We took all of it. The stocks, the home equity. It is gone. You do not need it anymore anyway." I whimpered, putting on a display of confused terror. I let my eyes widen slightly before rolling them back. I slurred a single word. "Why?" Vanessa leaned over me. Her face was mere inches from mine. I could smell the alcohol on her breath, mingling with the toxic aroma of the herbal tea lingering in the room. "Because Mom told me to," she whispered. Her voice carried a sudden, bitter edge. My heart skipped a beat against the medical tape. I focused entirely on maintaining my drooling, helpless facade while my mind raced. The plot twist unraveled right there in the dark. "Everyone thinks Patricia Cooper is a saint," Vanessa spat. The resentment in her tone was palpable. "They think she is this wealthy, refined matriarch. She is a fraud. She lost her inheritance years ago. She has been covering up horrific gambling debts for a decade. Offshore betting syndicates. Private poker rooms. People were calling her, threatening to ruin her reputation, threatening to take her house. She was desperate." Vanessa stood up, pacing the short length of the guest room. She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair. The flawless facade cracked, revealing the terrified, resentful accomplice underneath. "Mom came to me crying," Vanessa said. "She told me she needed $500,000 or she was finished. She knew you had the assets, but she also knew you would never give her a dime. You always judged us for our spending. So Mom formulated the strategy. She read about the heavy metals online. She ordered the powder from a sketchy overseas vendor using a prepaid debit card." Vanessa stopped pacing and glared down at me. "But she could not do the dirty work herself. She is too cowardly. She made me do it. She told me if I mixed the powder into your meal prep containers, we could split the payout. She said you would just slip into a coma and pass away quietly. We would clear my balloon mortgage and pay off her bookies. A clean slate for both of us. The recording captured the ultimate betrayal. My mother was not just an enabler or a silent partner. Patricia was the architect. She researched the poison. She acquired the weapon. She manipulated her golden child into executing the hit because she lacked the nerve to dirty her own hands. Patricia traded my life to cover her illegal wagers. Vanessa sighed, walking back to the nightstand. She picked up the empty wine glass. Her moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced once again by that cold, arrogant superiority. It is funny, she mused, looking down at me. The tea is working faster than I expected. You are already fading. I closed my eyes entirely. I relaxed my jaw and let my breathing slow to a steady, rhythmic drawl. I played the part of a woman slipping into the void. "Sleep well, Meadow," my sister whispered. "You were a good auditor, but you were a terrible sister." She turned on her heel. Her silk lounge set rustled as she walked to the door. The brass handle clicked. The heavy wood shut, blocking out the hallway light. The lock engaged. I lay perfectly still in the dark for 10 agonizing minutes. I listened to her footsteps recede down the corridor and descend the stairs. Only when the house returned to a profound, dead silence did I finally move. I reached into the folds of the thick duvet. I retrieved the scalding plastic specimen bag filled with the lethal herbal tea. The liquid had cooled slightly, but it remained a deadly piece of physical evidence. I tucked the bag safely into the bottom of my hospital discharge tote, ensuring the seal was watertight. Next, I unbuttoned my pajama top. I peeled the medical tape away from my collarbone. The adhesive stung my bruised skin, but I welcomed the sharp sting. I held the micro-audio recorder in the palm of my hand. A tiny red indicator light blinked steadily, confirming the device had captured the entire conversation. I pressed the stop button. The red light went dark. The legal trap was officially shut. I possessed the bank records, the forged loan documents, the interior security footage of the meal prep, the physical poison in the tea, and a crystal-clear audio confession detailing the entire conspiracy. I had the motive, the means, and the opportunity documented beyond any shadow of a doubt. The federal investigators had everything they needed to secure indictments for wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder. But handing the evidence over in quiet anonymity was not part of my plan. My mother and sister had spent their entire lives treating me like a disposable asset. They cultivated an image of pristine high society elegance while operating like ruthless thugs in the shadows. They stole my health and my wealth to protect their social standing. Therefore, their social standing was the exact arena where I intended to destroy them. Patricia and Vanessa were currently finalizing the details for the lavish welcome home brunch scheduled for the upcoming weekend. They had invited the wealthiest members of the Virginia Country Club. They hired a string quartet. They ordered expensive catered meals. They intended to parade my weakened body in front of their peers to harvest sympathy and admiration. They wanted a stage to perform their ultimate lie. I was going to give them that stage. I would let them stand before their friends and their elite community. I would let Patricia dab her dry eyes and speak about familial devotion. I would wait for the precise moment when they felt invincible. The physical danger of staying in this house had passed. The trap was locked and loaded. Now I just had to survive the next few days in silence, gathering my strength for the final, devastating public confrontation. 4 days later, the heavy wooden doors of the Oak Ridge Country Club swung open to welcome the Virginia elite. The transition from the suffocating pastel guest room to this sprawling estate felt like crossing into an alternate reality. The club sat on 200 acres of manicured rolling hills. Valets in crisp white shirts rushed to open the doors of luxury sedans and sport utility vehicles. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over round tables draped in heavy ivory linen. A string quartet played a bright classical piece in the far corner. The air smelled of expensive catered salmon, fresh lilies, and old money. Resting on a silver presentation tray near the grand entrance was a stack of surplus event invitations. I picked one up. The thick, cream-colored cardstock felt heavy in my hand. The text was pressed in shimmering gold foil. It formally requested the pleasure of the recipient's company for a brunch celebrating the miraculous recovery and homecoming of Meadow Cooper. My mother and sister had spared no expense on the stationery. The customized embossing, the premium paper stock, the hand calligraphy on the envelopes. It was a tangible, physical symbol of the funds they extracted from my home equity line of credit. I ran my thumb over the raised gold letters. They threw a lavish party in my honor, using the cash they stole while waiting for my heart to stop. Patricia stood near the center of the room holding court. She was practically glowing. She wore a tailored emerald silk dress that draped perfectly across her shoulders. The Cartier love bracelets clinked against each other on her wrist as she gestured wildly, telling a dramatic story to a circle of attentive listeners. For over a decade, my mother had desperately craved the validation of this specific social circle. She spent years trying to climb the ranks of the country club hierarchy, but her hidden offshore gambling debts always kept her marginalized. She could never afford the gala sponsorships or the premium charity donations required to secure her status as a matriarch of the community. Now funded by my liquidated stock portfolio, she had finally purchased the crown she always wanted. Vanessa stood a few feet away from our mother, holding a crystal flute filled with a sparkling mimosa. She wore a sleek white pantsuit, projecting the image of a polished, resilient caregiver. Two older women from the club board of directors were praising her. I could hear their hushed, respectful tones over the music. They told Vanessa she was an angel on earth for taking me into her home. They commended her tireless devotion. Vanessa offered a modest, practiced smile, placing a hand over her heart. She played the exhausted but grateful sibling flawlessly. She told them the late nights at the hospital were terrifying, but family always comes first. She sipped her drink, soaking in their admiration. She was entirely unaware that the federal government already possessed the video of her stirring poison into my lunch. I stood near the coat check, adjusting my grip on a polished wooden cane. I did not actually need the cane to walk anymore. The heavy metal toxins were slowly flushing out of my system, thanks to the binding agents Dr. Thorne prescribed. My physical strength was returning day by day. But walking into this ballroom with a steady, confident stride would ruin the illusion. I needed them to believe I was still broken. I needed them to feel invincible. I slouched my shoulders forward. I let my hand tremble slightly against the curved wooden handle of the cane. I had applied a pale matte foundation to my face and skipped the blush, leaving my skin looking hollow and sickly. I stepped into the ballroom, leaning heavily on the wooden prop. The string quartet continued playing, but a ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes darted toward me. Patricia spotted me immediately, her face lit up with a brilliant manufactured joy. She excused herself from her circle and rushed across the patterned carpet. "Meadow, sweetheart, you made it!" she cried out. Her voice was pitched loud enough for half the room to hear. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders, pulling me into a suffocating embrace. The overwhelming scent of her Chanel perfume filled my lungs. It was the exact same perfume I smelled in the dark when she stole my thumbprint to access my offshore accounts. I forced a weak, wavering smile. "I am just glad to be here, Mom," I whispered, matching her theatrical energy. Vanessa hurried over, trailing a professional photographer she hired for the event. The photographer carried a large camera with a blinding flash attachment. "Oh, let us get a picture," Vanessa insisted, wrapping her arm around my waist. She squeezed me tightly, ensuring I stayed propped up for the lens. "Look at the camera, Meadow. Try to smile." The flash erupted, painting neon spots across my vision. The photographer snapped half a dozen photos documenting the loving reunion. These pictures were destined for Vanessa's social media profiles to cement her legacy as the ultimate supportive sister. For the next hour, I was paraded around the ballroom like a prized, fragile artifact. Guests approached me with tilted heads and soft, pitying voices. A local real estate developer patted my shoulder and told me I was lucky to have such a dedicated family. A retired judge shook my hand gently and praised my mother's unwavering faith during my coma. I accepted their hollow sympathy with quiet nods. I played the grateful survivor. I did not correct them. I did not betray a single hint of the anger simmering just beneath my ribs. A woman in a floral dress asked Vanessa where Marcus was. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. She smoothly explained that Marcus took the children on a last-minute weekend camping trip to the mountains. She claimed he wanted to give the house some quiet space for my recovery. The lie was seamless. The guests nodded in understanding, praising Marcus for his thoughtful consideration. None of them knew Marcus had packed his bags in tears, terrified of the woman he married. None of them knew the camping trip was an emergency evacuation to escape the federal blast radius. Waiters in black vests began circling the room, tapping delicate spoons against crystal water glasses. The chiming sound signaled the guests to take their seats for the formal brunch service. The attendees filtered toward the large round tables, finding their assigned name cards. I navigated through the crowd, leaning on my cane, taking slow, deliberate steps. I reached the head table, positioned directly in front of the small, elevated stage. I sat down, resting the cane against the edge of the table. I placed my black leather handbag on my lap. Inside the bag rested a sealed manila envelope containing the printed bank logs, the loan origination documents, and a secondary encrypted drive holding the surveillance footage. Taped securely beneath my silk blouse, right over my collarbone, was the micro-audio recorder holding Vanessa's late-night confession. Patricia walked up the short flight of stairs to the stage. She stood behind a clear acrylic podium. A microphone rested on a slender metal stand. She tapped the microphone twice to test the sound. The low, thumping echo silenced the remaining chatter in the ballroom. 100 of the most influential people in our county sat with their hands folded in their laps, giving my mother their undivided attention. This was the moment Patricia had dreamed about for years. She was the center of their universe. She was the wealthy, devoted matriarch hosting a flawless event. The illusion was perfect. The trap was fully loaded. The calm before the storm settled over the room like a heavy velvet curtain. I kept my eyes fixed on the podium, feeling the cool metal of the recording device against my skin. The antagonists had built a magnificent, towering pedestal for themselves. They had no idea they had handed me the sledgehammer. Patricia leaned closer to the clear acrylic podium. She gripped the edges with both hands, allowing her diamond rings to catch the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. She lowered her head. A single, rehearsed tear rolled down her cheek. The ballroom was silent, captivated by her performance. I stood by her hospital bed for 3 weeks, Patricia told the crowd. Her voice trembled with practiced emotion. I watched the monitors. I prayed to a universe I thought had abandoned us. I begged the world to take me instead. A mother should never have to bury her youngest child. Family is the only thing that matters. We survived this nightmare because we held on to each other. A collective sigh of sympathy rippled through the seated guests. Women dabbed their eyes with linen napkins. Men nodded with solemn respect. Patricia had them in the palm of her hand. She was the hero of her own fictional narrative. She lifted her gaze and scanned the room, finding me seated at the head table. And now, Patricia said, her voice swelling with triumph, please welcome my beautiful, resilient daughter. Come up here, Meadow. Show everyone what a miracle looks like. The room erupted into polite, sustained applause. I grabbed the curved wooden handle of my cane. I pushed my chair back, letting it scrape loudly against the polished floor. I forced my hands to shake. I took slow, agonizing steps toward the short staircase leading to the stage. Vanessa stood near the front row, offering an encouraging smile. She looked like a proud sibling watching a wounded bird attempt to fly. I climbed the 3 carpeted steps. Every eye in the ballroom tracked my fragile movements. I reached the podium. Patricia stepped aside, wrapping one arm around my waist. She squeezed me in a tight side hug. Her Chanel perfume filled my senses. It was the scent of betrayal. She handed me the microphone. Her fingers brushed mine. Her skin was warm and alive, while she believed mine was slowly dying. I took the microphone. The metal cylinder felt heavy and solid in my grip. I looked out over the sea of wealthy socialites. I saw country club board members, local politicians, and affluent real estate developers. These were the people my mother worshipped. These were the judges of her social worth. I brought the device close to my mouth. A sharp, piercing, high-pitched squeal of feedback cut through the polite applause. The jarring noise echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Guests winced. Several people covered their ears. The sudden sonic disruption shattered the manufactured peace of the brunch. The applause died instantly. I did not apologize for the noise. I did not adjust the volume. I simply let go of the wooden cane. The prop clattered onto the hard stage floor, rolling away toward the velvet curtains. I rolled my shoulders back. I straightened my spine. The frail slouch vanished. The trembling stopped. I stood tall and steady, projecting the quiet authority of a senior financial auditor ready to deliver a devastating report. "My mother just told you I survived a tragedy," I said. My voice was clear, unshakable, and amplified across the silent room. I let the words hang in the air for a long moment. I turned my head slightly to look at Patricia. The color had already begun to drain from her cheeks. She is lying. I survived a murder attempt. A collective gasp escaped the front row. The retired judge lowered his coffee cup, staring at me in confusion. The string quartet players froze with their bows hovering above their instruments. Patricia let out a nervous, breathless laugh. "Meadow, sweetheart, what are you saying?" "The toxins are confusing you." She reached out, trying to gently take the microphone from my hand. I stepped back, out of her reach. "Do not touch me," I commanded. The sharp edge in my tone made her recoil. I looked toward the back of the room. I caught the eye of the audiovisual technician hired to run the slideshow of my childhood photos. Before the event started, I had handed him a customized digital drive. I gave him a crisp $100 bill and specific instructions to play my presentation when I gave the signal. I nodded at him. The large projection screens flanking the stage flickered to life. The soft montage of family memories vanished. In its place, a stark black and white document appeared. It was the forged power of attorney. While I was in a coma fighting for my life, my mother and sister did not sit by my bed, I announced to the crowd. They sat in a bank office. That document on the screen bears a fraudulent signature. They used it to liquidate my entire stock portfolio and extract a $200,000 credit line against my home. The screens transitioned. A spreadsheet appeared detailing the wire transfers. The red numbers indicated the withdrawal of over $300,000. "You are drinking mimosas and eating catered salmon paid for with my stolen life savings," I told the audience. "This entire brunch is a fraud funded by a felony." Murmurs erupted across the ballroom. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Vanessa lunged forward from the front row. Her pristine white pantsuit wrinkled as she rushed the edge of the stage. "Meadow, stop this right now," Vanessa hissed. "You are having a mental breakdown. Someone get a doctor." I ignored her. I signaled the technician again. The screen changed. The high-definition security footage from Vanessa's kitchen began to play. The room grew deathly quiet. The video showed Vanessa retrieving the opaque detox tea tin. It showed her measuring the grayish powder into my meal prep containers. The timestamp blinked in bright red digits in the corner of the display. "That is my sister," I narrated, my voice echoing over the speakers. "The powder she is mixing into my food is thallium, a heavy metal poison. She fed it to me for weeks. She caused my organ failure, so I would be incapacitated long enough for them to drain my accounts." A woman near the middle of the room let out a stifled scream. Several men stood up from their chairs. The reality of the footage was undeniable. They were watching an attempted homicide unfold in vivid detail. Vanessa froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll. She stared at the projection, watching herself commit the crime. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was trapped in the blinding light of her own guilt. But the narrative was not complete. The guests needed to know the deepest, darkest truth. They needed to understand the motive behind the madness. I turned to face the crowd once more. I pointed directly at my mother, who was now gripping the acrylic podium as if it were a life raft. Vanessa was just the executioner, I revealed. The plot did not originate with her. The architect of this nightmare is standing right next to me. Patricia shook her head frantically. "No," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "No, Meadow, please." My mother has spent the last decade projecting an image of pristine wealth to all of you, I continued. I locked eyes with the country club board member sitting in the second row. You thought she was your equal. She is not. She lost her inheritance years ago. She has been covering up catastrophic, illegal offshore gambling debts. She owes hundreds of thousands of dollars to syndicates and private bookies. They were threatening to expose her and ruin her precious social standing. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The elite peers Patricia had worshipped for her entire adult life were staring at her with unvarnished disgust. The social currency she had sacrificed her daughter to protect was evaporating into thin air. She knew I would never give her the money to cover her illegal bets, I said, so she researched the poison. She purchased the heavy metals from an untraceable overseas vendor, but she was too much of a coward to dirty her own hands. She convinced Vanessa to spike my food, promising to split the payout once I was dead. Patricia covered her face with trembling hands. Her knees buckled slightly. The immaculate emerald silk dress bunched around her waist. The facade was shattered. The elegant matriarch was dead, and a desperate, ruthless thief stood exposed in her place. I reached into my blouse and pulled out the micro-audio recorder. I held the small black device up for the room to see. I wore a federal wiretap during my entire recovery at Vanessa's house, I stated. I captured a crystal-clear audio confession detailing the whole conspiracy. The evidence you see on these screens was transmitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation yesterday morning. Panic finally overrode Patricia's paralysis. She lunged toward me, trying to grab the recording device. Her manicured nails scratched the back of my hand. I stepped aside easily, letting her stumble forward. She crashed into the metal microphone stand, sending it toppling off the stage. The heavy thud of the microphone hitting the floor echoed across the banquet hall. I had dismantled their reputation, their finances, and their freedom in front of the exact audience they valued more than my life. The private war was over. The public execution was complete. The crowd sat paralyzed, waiting for the inevitable arrival of the authorities to sweep away the wreckage. Patricia scrambled across the wooden stage floor. Her manicured hands clawed at the fallen microphone stand. Her breaths came in short, ragged gasps. The emerald silk dress twisted around her knees. She looked up at the projection screen. The forged bank transfers glowed in bright white light, illuminating her terrified face. She tried to speak, but her throat only produced a hollow, wheezing sound. The polished matriarch of the Virginia social scene was gone. A cornered thief knelt in her place. Down in the front row, Vanessa stumbled backward. Her pristine white pantsuit caught on the edge of a dining chair. She knocked over a crystal water goblet. The glass shattered against the hardwood floor. The sharp crack echoed through the silent banquet hall. Guests pulled their chairs away from her. The elite circle she spent years cultivating now looked at her like she was a dangerous stranger. The wealthy real estate developers and country club board members stepped aside, forming a wide circle of isolation around my sister. The heavy oak doors at the back of the grand ballroom swung open. The sudden movement drew every eye away from the stage. A team of federal agents and Virginia State police officers stepped into the room. Their dark tactical jackets contrasted sharply with the ivory linens and pastel floral arrangements. They moved with coordinated precision. They did not shout. They did not draw weapons. They simply walked down the center aisle, radiating an undeniable authority. Dr. Aris Thorne walked beside the lead investigator. He wore his standard, tailored navy suit. His expression remained grim and focused. He spotted me standing on the stage and offered a single, confirming nod. He had fulfilled his promise. He had brought the authorities to finish the job. Special Agent David Russo led the formation. I recognized his measured stride from our previous collaborations investigating corporate money laundering. He approached the stage, keeping his eyes locked on my mother. 2 state troopers branched off toward the front row. They surrounded Vanessa before she could take another step toward the exit. Vanessa Cooper, a trooper, stated. His voice was firm and carried across the quiet room. "You are under arrest for attempted murder and wire fraud." "No," Vanessa shrieked. Her voice cracked. She raised her hands in a frantic gesture of surrender. "You do not understand. It was a misunderstanding." She pointed a trembling finger at the stage. "My mother made me do it. She told me it was the only way to save the house." The trooper ignored her desperate pleas. He reached to his belt and unclipped a pair of steel handcuffs. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," he instructed. A second detective stepped forward, holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside the thick, transparent material sat the heavy, opaque detox tea tin from Vanessa's kitchen. The detective had already executed a search warrant on her suburban home while the brunch was underway. The physical container that held the thallium was securely logged into their chain of custody. Vanessa stared at the canister. The remaining color drained from her face. She realized the digital video was not my only proof. The authorities possessed the murder weapon. The cold metal cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. Agent Russo stopped at the edge of the stage. He looked down at Patricia, who was still kneeling on the floorboards. Then he looked up at me. "Miss Cooper," he said, "we received the digital files you transmitted. The audio recording and the security footage provide sufficient probable cause for these detentions." I stepped forward. I reached into my black leather handbag. The audio wiretap and the surveillance video were enough to secure a basic arrest. But I was a senior financial auditor. My career was built on tracing hidden assets and dismantling complex criminal networks. I did not just survive an assassination attempt. I spent the last few days using my encrypted laptop to reconstruct a decade of my mother's hidden financial history. I pulled a thick, meticulously bound folder from my bag. The dossier contained over 200 pages of audited spreadsheets. I did not just uncover the theft of my own property. I traced the origins of her debt. "Agent Russo," I said, keeping my voice level and clear, "the wiretap explains the motive, but this ledger proves the underlying crimes." I handed the heavy binder down to the federal investigator. He opened the cover, examining the first page. "This dossier details 10 years of illegal gambling operations," I explained to the silent room. "It contains the routing numbers for her offshore betting syndicates. It outlines the systemic wire fraud she committed to hide her losses. It includes cross-reference tax returns, proving intentional evasion of federal revenue laws. She did not just forge my signature. She defrauded the government to cover her private poker debts. Every transaction is highlighted, indexed, and verified." Agent Russo closed the binder. He tucked it securely under his arm. "You always do excellent work, Miss Cooper," he noted. "This will make the prosecution very straightforward." He turned his attention back to my mother. "Patricia Cooper," he announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and tax evasion." Patricia tried to stand. Her legs refused to hold her weight. She grabbed the edge of the acrylic podium, hauling herself upward. Her chest heaved. Sweat ruined her expensive makeup. "Meadow," she gasped. Her voice was a pathetic whimper. "Please, I am your mother. You cannot let them do this. I gave you life." I looked down at her. "You tried to take it away," I replied. 2 female agents stepped onto the stage. They took Patricia by the arms, pulling her away from the podium. She did not fight them. All the fight had evaporated the moment the federal agent read her charges. She held her hands out. The lead agent secured the restraints. The cold industrial steel of the handcuffs snapped shut directly over Patricia's glittering Cartier bracelets. The luxury jewelry she bought with my stolen life savings now sat pinned beneath the unforgiving metal of law enforcement. It was the perfect physical manifestation of her greed. The very wealth she coveted had become the anchor dragging her into a prison cell. Patricia looked down at her bound wrists. The reality of her situation finally breached her delusion. The socialite facade crumbled into dust. Her knees gave out a second time. This was not a theatrical faint in a hospital corridor designed to avoid difficult questions. This was a genuine physical collapse. Her body folded. The agents had to catch her by the shoulders to prevent her head from hitting the wooden stage. They dragged her limp, sobbing form down the stairs. The ballroom remained paralyzed. 100 wealthy guests watched in horrified silence as the Virginia State Police escorted the two women out the grand double doors. The extravagant floral arrangements and the crystal chandeliers mocked the profound ugliness of the arrests. The elite social circle my mother had worshipped now witnessed her ultimate degradation. She was not leaving the country club as a triumphant matriarch. She was leaving as a federal prisoner. I stood alone on the stage. The chaotic noise of the police radios faded down the hallway. The heavy oak doors swung shut, sealing the banquet hall. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The bruising on my arms was beginning to fade. The toxic chemicals were leaving my system. My body was healing, and the cancer that had infected my family dynamic was finally excised. But the operation was not entirely finished. The architects of my ruin were in custody, but my financial assets remained frozen in a tangled web of fraudulent loans and offshore accounts. Vanessa and Patricia were heading to a holding cell, but I still had to navigate the systemic wreckage they left behind. I had to face the legal bureaucracy required to restore my property and secure my future. Furthermore, I needed to verify that Marcus had successfully escaped the blast radius with his children. The climax of the confrontation was over, but the demanding work of rebuilding my life from the ashes was just beginning. The aftermath of the country club confrontation unfolded not with a sudden explosive crash, but through a slow, methodical dismantling. Over the following weeks, the systemic ruin of my mother and sister played out across courtrooms and corporate banking offices. The federal justice system moves with a cold, mechanical precision that does not care about high society reputations or tailored silk dresses. 2 days after the arrests, I sat in the back row of the federal courthouse observing their initial arraignment. Patricia and Vanessa were led into the sterile, fluorescent-lit room by armed marshals. They wore standard-issue orange jumpsuits. Heavy transport chains bound their wrists and ankles, producing a dull, metallic rattle with every step they took. The contrast between their current uniform and the luxury garments they wore to the brunch was staggering. Without her expensive cosmetics and perfectly styled hair, my mother looked frail and deeply aged. Vanessa kept her head bowed, hiding her face from the gallery. The defense attorneys requested bail, citing their deep community ties and lack of prior criminal records. The federal prosecutor countered immediately. He presented the judge with the audited dossier detailing Patricia's offshore gambling syndicates. He argued that their access to hidden overseas accounts and their demonstrated willingness to commit premeditated violence made them extreme flight risks. The judge did not hesitate. He banged his gavel and denied bond for both defendants. They were remanded to the county detention center to await their federal trial. As the marshals guided them back toward the holding cells, Vanessa cast a desperate, panicked glance across the courtroom. She was looking for her husband. She was looking for the man who always bailed her out of her reckless mistakes. But the wooden benches were empty. Marcus was not there. While they traded their freedom for a concrete cell, I focused my energy on the financial battlefield. Evelyn Pierce, my civil litigator, coordinated directly with Special Agent Russo. We scheduled an emergency meeting with the regional vice president of the bank that issued the fraudulent home equity line. We walked into the sleek glass boardroom carrying the unredacted Federal Bureau of Investigation incident report. The bank executives reviewed the documented evidence of the forged power of attorney and the fraudulent notary stamp. The color drained from their faces. Financial institutions dread federal audits, and the prospect of being implicated in an attempted homicide conspiracy terrified their legal department. They did not drag their feet or hide behind bureaucratic delays. Within 48 hours, the bank formally voided the $200,000 credit line. They dissolved the lien against my Richmond townhouse, wiping the property title completely clean. Retrieving the liquidated stock portfolio required a more aggressive strategy. The funds were parked in an offshore holding shell controlled by Patricia's bookies. However, because the federal government now possessed the encrypted tracking data I provided, the international authorities cooperated swiftly. The overseas accounts were frozen. The stolen capital was seized and repatriated. Week by week, the stolen digits reappeared on my dashboard. My life savings returned to its rightful place, secure and impenetrable. A month after the arrest, I received a text message from Marcus asking to meet. We chose a quiet, independent coffee shop, far away from the suburban neighborhoods Vanessa used to frequent. Marcus walked through the glass door looking profoundly different from the exhausted, captive man I spoke with in the hospital. The dark, heavy circles under his eyes had faded. His posture was upright. The suffocating weight of a decade-long toxic marriage had finally lifted from his shoulders. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me in a secluded corner booth. He told me the family court judge granted his request for an expedited divorce. Because Vanessa was incarcerated on felony charges involving the premeditated poisoning of a family member, the custody proceedings moved with unprecedented speed. The state recognized the severe danger she posed. Marcus was awarded sole legal and physical custody of their son and daughter. Furthermore, the judge issued a permanent restraining order preventing Vanessa from contacting the children. I took them to my parents' property out in the country, Marcus shared. His voice was steady and grounded. They are enrolled in a new school district. They have a big backyard and a golden retriever. They are safe, Meadow. They are finally insulated from her vanity and her lies. I smiled, feeling a genuine wave of relief for my niece and nephew. They deserved a father who prioritized their well-being over maintaining a flawless suburban facade. I owe you my life. Marcus continued, looking down at his coffee cup. I spent 12 years making excuses for her behavior. I told myself she just liked nice things. I ignored the red flags because confronting the truth meant destroying my family. If you had not forced the issue, if you had not set that trap, I would still be living in a house with a murderer. You ripped the bandage off before she could destroy me, too. He gently placed the keys to Vanessa's suburban house on the wooden table between us. The metal clinked softly against the polished surface. The federal authorities seized the mortgage payments she made using your stolen money, he explained. Without those fraudulent funds, the balloon payment defaulted. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings yesterday morning. I finished packing our personal belongings last night. The bank can have the property. I never want to step foot inside those walls again. He stared at the keys, pushing them slightly away from his coffee cup. It is a symbol of everything she valued, he mused. A giant, beautiful, empty shell. She traded her sister, her husband, and her children to keep that house, and now it belongs to a corporate holding company. We finished our coffee in a comfortable, companionable silence. When Marcus stood up to leave, he hugged me tightly. It was the embrace of a fellow survivor. We had both navigated the treacherous waters of the Cooper family dynamics, and we had both managed to swim to the shore. He walked out of the cafe, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight, eager to return to his children. I remained in the corner booth finishing my drink. I looked out the window, watching the city traffic flow down the avenue. The antagonists were sitting in a county lockup, facing decades in federal prison. The stolen funds were restored to my secure accounts. Yet an unexpected hollow sensation settled in my chest. I had spent the last 2 months operating entirely on survival instincts and righteous anger. I had treated my life like a forensic audit, methodically eliminating the liabilities. But now the ledger was balanced. The perpetrators were vanquished. The battlefield was entirely silent. I realized with a sudden, sharp clarity that returning to normal was impossible. I still owned the Richmond townhouse, but the pristine kitchen island where I unknowingly signed the forged document haunted my memory. The final challenge was no longer about defeating my mother and sister. The ultimate conflict was figuring out how to construct an entirely new reality from the ashes of the old one. 6 months passed. The transition from survival to living did not happen overnight. It occurred in slow, quiet increments. The first time I slept through the night without waking up covered in a cold sweat. The first time I drank a cup of coffee without obsessively checking the bottom of the mug for a gray, powdery residue. The first time I looked in the mirror and recognized the woman looking back. The hollow, bruised patient from the hospital ward was gone. I sold the townhouse in Richmond. The property held too many ghosts. It was the place where I unknowingly signed the forged document, and it was a structure stained by the invisible ink of my mother's betrayal. I needed a clean break. I used the restored capital from the offshore holding accounts to purchase a sprawling piece of property in the Shenandoah Valley. My new home sits at the end of a winding gravel driveway, insulated by acres of dense, ancient forest. It is a modern cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rolling mountains. There is no homeowner association. There are no country club committees. There is only the wind moving through the pine trees and the profound, unbreakable silence of absolute autonomy. I left my position as a senior financial auditor. Dismantling my own family had permanently altered my relationship with the corporate world. I no longer desired to spend 80 hours a week hunting down missing decimal points for massive conglomerates. Instead, I opened a boutique consulting firm specializing in forensic accounting for victims of domestic financial abuse. I help people untangle the complicated webs of fraud woven by their own relatives. I use my expertise to arm the vulnerable. It is exacting, demanding work. But for the first time in my career, it feels meaningful. The federal trial concluded 3 weeks ago. It was a swift, decisive procedure. Patricia and Vanessa were crushed under the weight of the undeniable digital evidence. The audio wiretap and the surveillance video left their defense attorneys with no viable arguments. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a sweeping guilty verdict on all counts. During the sentencing phase, I delivered my victim impact statement. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I stood behind the wooden podium in the federal courtroom and looked directly at the 2 women in the orange jumpsuits. I told the judge about the years of emotional manipulation. I explained how they weaponized the language of family to excuse their greed. I detailed the profound physical agony of multi-organ failure caused by their toxic cocktail. I concluded my statement by telling the court that Patricia and Vanessa Cooper did not deserve mercy because they had never shown an ounce of it to me. The judge agreed. He handed down a sentence that guaranteed neither of them would see the outside of a federal penitentiary for a very long time. I occasionally receive updates from my former civil litigator Evelyn Pierce regarding their incarceration. The irony of their current situation is almost too poetic to ignore. Patricia, the woman who coveted high society status and wore Cartier bracelets bought with stolen money, is now assigned to the prison laundry detail. She spends her days folding coarse, generic uniforms alongside the very people she used to look down upon. Vanessa, the golden child who believed she was entitled to my labor, is now working the sanitation shift, scrubbing concrete floors for pennies an hour. The lavish lifestyle they attempted to murder me to maintain is dead and buried. But there was one final loose end to tie, one last financial maneuver to complete the circle of poetic justice. Shortly after the trial concluded, Evelyn notified me that the Oak Ridge Country Club was facing a severe liquidity crisis. The elite institution where Patricia had desperately tried to buy her crown was hemorrhaging capital. A series of poor investments and declining memberships had pushed the club to the brink of bankruptcy. Their primary commercial mortgage was severely distressed, and the holding company was actively seeking a quiet buyer to avoid public humiliation. I instructed Evelyn to form a blind, anonymous, limited liability company. I used a portion of my restored wealth to purchase the debt. I bought the mortgage in its entirety. I now own the financial fate of the Oak Ridge Country Club. I am the silent landlord of the exact ballroom where I dropped the microphone and dismantled my family. The wealthy socialites who sipped mimosas while watching my mother fake her maternal devotion are now unknowingly writing their monthly membership checks to me. I hold the power to foreclose on the property whenever I choose. But for now, I prefer to simply hold the debt. It is a quiet, invisible victory, a reminder that real power does not require an audience or a designer dress. Real power is having the absolute control to shape your own reality. I keep in touch with Dr. Aris Thorne. We meet for coffee every few months when I drive back into the city for client meetings. He is the only physician I trust. I also maintain a gentle, distant relationship with Marcus. He sends me photographs of my niece and nephew playing in their new backyard. They are thriving under his care, free from the toxic vanity of their mother. Marcus and I are forever bonded by the trauma we survived, but we respect the boundaries necessary to keep our new lives separate and secure. It is a Tuesday evening. The sun is setting behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting long purple shadows across the valley. I stand in my new kitchen. The countertops are clean, the air smells of fresh cedar, and the faint aroma of the Earl Grey tea steeping in my mug. I walk to the solid oak front door. I reach out and turn the heavy brass deadbolt. The lock engages with a satisfying, solid click. I am safe. I spent 22 years of my life believing that being a good daughter and a supportive sister meant absorbing their cruelty. I believed that the word family was a binding contract that required me to endure whatever emotional or financial abuse they decided to inflict. I thought my role was to work hard, stay quiet, and provide the safety net they continually tore to pieces. I was wrong. Blood is a biological accident. It does not grant anyone a free pass to steal your peace, your wealth, or your life. The people who truly belong in your life are the ones who respect the boundaries you draw around it. I walk back into the kitchen and pick up my mug. The tea is warm and comforting. I take a sip, savoring the simple, uncomplicated flavor. I walk into the living room and sit down in a large leather armchair. I open a new hardcover novel. The house is completely silent except for the crackle of the wood burning in the stone fireplace. I am no longer the scapegoat of the Cooper family. I am no longer the reliable ATM or the quiet victim. I am the survivor who saw the trap, fought back, and won. The cost of this piece was staggering, but as I turn the first page of my book and listen to the fire, I know without a doubt that it was worth every single penny. There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a perfectly manicured American suburb at dusk. It is the quiet of locked doors, drawn blinds, and secrets buried beneath imported hardwood floors. We are taught to chase a very specific, traditional version of the American dream. The beautiful home, the exclusive country club membership, the flawless family portrait smiling down from the mantelpiece. But what happens when that gilded frame holds a nightmare? The story of Meadow Cooper is much more than a chilling criminal headline or a true crime anomaly. It is a profound, terrifying mirror held up to the very core of modern parenting, challenging everything we think we know about family, responsibility, and the moral compass we hand down to our children. In a deeply materialistic society where success is too often measured by square footage and designer labels, parents can easily fall into the trap of vanity and favoritism. Patricia Cooper did not wake up one day and decide to destroy her family. The moral decay started decades earlier, rooted in the quiet, insidious sin of favoritism. By placing her eldest daughter, Vanessa, on a pedestal, treating her as the golden child, whose every whim was funded and every flaw excused, Patricia deprived her of the two most vital tools a parent can provide: independence and a moral foundation. Vanessa was not taught how to build a life of her own. She was taught how to extract one from someone else. Conversely, Meadow was designated the scapegoat, the reliable beast of burden meant to serve as a perpetual source of financial exploitation. This dynamic is a devastating betrayal of the traditional family structure, which relies absolutely on fairness, honesty, and unconditional love to thrive. When parents value Cartier bracelets, high-stakes gambling, and social standing above the very lives of their loved ones, they raise adults who view relationships as transactions. Material possessions can never replace family ties. Parents carry an awesome educational responsibility to teach their children that human value lies in character and integrity, not in luxury items or illusory social status. Vanessa's ultimate moral decay was not a spontaneous event. It was the direct result of a mother not only covering up her daughter's entitlement, but actively leading her down a path of sin. This tragedy also rips the elegant mask off the upper echelons of society, exposing the stark contrast between glamour and inner emptiness. We picture country clubs filled with the scent of fresh lilies and the soft strains of classical music as bastions of civilized society. Yet, in Meadow's life, this luxurious backdrop served merely as a stage to hide murder plots and illicit debts. It is a jarring reminder that social status does not guarantee moral character. While Meadow was fighting for her life in a sterile hospital room, experiencing the ultimate family indifference, her mother and sister were busy draining her life savings and texting her to stop being dramatic. This profound lack of emotional awareness serves as a dire warning about the rapid degradation of family values when greed is allowed to prevail over empathy. To achieve true peace and happiness, and to guide people to reform themselves for a better life, each individual must cultivate 3 vital pillars: wisdom, morality, and perseverance. Wisdom is defined by clear awareness and the ability to set firm boundaries. Meadow used her professional skills as a financial auditor to literally and metaphorically audit her own life. Wisdom here is the profound ability to recognize the cold truth, entirely unblinded by the sentimental title of blood relative. It is knowing how to set impenetrable boundaries to protect oneself from negative influences, even when those influences come from the closest members of your own family. Morality requires unyielding integrity and courage. Within this dark narrative, we find a profound lesson in moral reform through Marcus, Vanessa's husband. Despite living in a deeply toxic environment dripping with material temptation and comfortable lies, Marcus represents the ultimate act of parental responsibility. He chose to stand for the truth, to protect his children's moral development, and to denounce evil, even though it meant breaking up his marriage and destroying the life he knew. Integrity is the greatest, most enduring strength that helps people stand firm against material temptations. Finally, there is perseverance, or grit, the ability to overcome severe adversity while maintaining complete self-control. Meadow transformed her vulnerable hospital bed into a strategic war room. Instead of succumbing to the heartbreak of ultimate betrayal, she persevered in gathering evidence and confronting her enemies with a terrifying composure. Her grit is further demonstrated in her decision to abandon her old, haunted life, to rebuild from scratch in the Shenandoah Valley, using her hard-won knowledge to help other victims of financial abuse. We all have a responsibility to audit our own lives, to look closely at the values we are instilling in our children and the boundaries we accept from our relatives. If you found yourself nodding along to this reflection, if Meadow's grit or Marcus's courage struck a chord deep within your own experiences, please take a moment to subscribe and follow our channel, Luke Revenge Start. We explore the profound, often hidden dynamics of family, betrayal, and the righteous pursuit of justice. Join our community, and let's continue to unpack the stories that teach us how to survive and thrive. The final, enduring message of Meadow's journey is this: true happiness does not come from possessing other people's wealth or securing the fleeting approval of high society. It comes from the profound inner freedom we achieve when we live according to ethics and wisdom. We are raised to believe that family is an unbreakable bond, a sacred contract signed at birth. But blood ties are, in the end, merely a biological coincidence. The people who truly belong in your life are those who respect the boundaries you set. As you look around your own dinner table tonight, at the faces of those you call family, ask yourself, are you tied together by love, emotional awareness, and mutual respect, or simply by the heavy inherited chains of obligation? And if the time ever comes to audit your own life, what will you find hiding in the ledger?